Thank you for joining us for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade Family Fit Night. I want to take a moment now to share the CMS FIT Night webpage with you, which can be found by going to the bit.ly on your screen, bit.ly/capital F, capital I, capital T, lowercase night, NIGHT. On this page, we have a frequently asked questions document with questions you might have after joining us tonight. The FAQ document contains links to resources shared in the presentation, as well as answers to common questions we receive regarding 3-5 math and literacy content. If you have an additional question that is not listed on the FAQ, please submit your question to the 3-5 Math and Literacy Specialist using this form. You will choose your child's grade, content area, reading, or math, and then enter your question and press submit. Please take a moment now to write down this bit.ly link, bit.ly/FIT Night Questions, where you can access the form to submit additional questions. Please note that the bit.ly link is case sensitive, so be sure to note which letters are capitalized. Once you have submitted a question, check back on the CMS FIT Night webpage, as we will be updating the FAQ document with the additional questions shared with us in the Google form. Thank you again for joining us this evening for the 3-5 Family Fit Night.
Hello and welcome to 3rd through 5th grade Literacy Fit Night. My name is Dr. Darla Barker and I am one of 6 literacy specialists with the district. We're so excited to have you here with us. We look forward to working together as we support your students' needs in literacy. In our EL education curriculum used for literacy, we teach students by modules or units. When we are looking at a unit of study, it is helpful to look at the 4 T's of the unit: topic, task, targeted learning, and text. 3rd grade will be studying the importance of wind as their topic. Students will be asked to complete the task of creating a presentation for a public service announcement about a water issue. They will be addressing the targeted learning of asking and answering questions, referring to the text, and reporting on a topic using relevant and descriptive details. This means that students need to have eyes on text and be able to find evidence from the text and cite quotes. They will need a reason for what they are writing. Students will be reading 3 texts: One Well, the Story of Water on Earth, Water Dance, and The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. In 4th grade, students will be studying the topic of perspectives on the American Revolution. They will be asked to complete the task of participating in a text-based discussion sharing whether they would have supported the American Revolution if they had lived during colonial times. During this unit, students will address the targeted learning of integrating information from 2 texts to talk and write about it. We want students to be able to have discussions about the text while referencing information from the text to support what they are saying and writing. In other words, we want students to be able to support their thinking on the topic of the American Revolution. Students will be reading 2 texts: Colonial Voices, Hear Them Speak, and Divided Loyalties, the Barton Family During the American Revolution. And finally, the 4 T's for our 5th grade students. 5th graders will be addressing the topic of athlete leaders of social change. Students will be expected to complete the task of creating a poster highlighting a personal quality necessary to be an effective leader of social change. As students progress in grades, the targeted learning also progresses. 5th grade students will address the targeted learning of drawing inferences from the text, quoting accurately from the text, integrating information from several texts to write or speak about the subject, organizing information and preparing to write, and recalling, summarizing information in their work and providing resources. We want students to be able to read a text and recall or summarize that information when they write or speak about it. We also want students to be able to provide resources where they gathered their information. Students will be reading the text, Promises to Keep, How Jackie Robinson Changed America. To better support your students in grades 3 through 5, make sure to ask your student about the text they are reading. Have your students provide information from the text to support what they share with you. Students have access to these texts digitally through Sora.
One task we see reoccurring in grades 3 through 5 is how to extract a main idea to create summaries. As students enter middle school, they are expected to come already knowing how to write a summary that include these main ideas. Students are also expected to be able to extract main ideas and formulate summaries on their unit assessments and when developing writing for their upcoming units. This strategy that we're going to show you, you can use at home to help your student in this work. In this strategy, we will be reading an excerpt of a line text. The goal for this is to help families understand the skills students will learn to build their knowledge about the topic of study in service of impacting their community. Part of the challenge for many readers as they move to expository nonfiction from reading stories is that the pace of their reading actually needs to slow down. Strategies like this one helps them to slow down and monitor their comprehension before moving on. It is also a collaborative learning strategy used to increase comprehension of expository texts. If you look on the graphic on the left, the text is divided into sections that serve as stopping points for clarification and writing. At each stop point, the meaning of the passage is discussed and a single summary or main idea sentence is negotiated. The cycle is repeated until the entire text has been read. The list of sentences generated by the students serve as a process for longer text. These are also called GISs. GISs build towards summaries. Here is a typical graphic organizer on your right that students use in the curriculum to do this work. Let's do this process together. We'll start with a text that is topic and task aligned to our curriculum. You can use any nonfiction text at home and also use this strategy as well. For step 1, we chunk or divide the text into sections that represent logical summary points. You can indicate these with a line, boxing off a section, or just writing the word stop in the margins. For this practice, I will read aloud the first section of the text while you read along silently. At home, reading out loud to your student is perfectly acceptable when doing this work. Let's do this together. In the post-Civil War segregated world, Black people and white people went to separate schools, ate in separate restaurants, stayed in separate hotels, and sat in different sections on trains and buses. In many places, they used different bathrooms, telephone booths, and water fountains. Blacks and whites went to separate pool halls, auditoriums, and circuses. Many Black people were restricted from using parks, libraries, and hospitals that serve white people. Signs on public facilities often read colored and white in an effort to keep one race from coming in contact with the other. Segregation was part of everyday life almost everywhere, especially in the South. So I did step 1, I chunked, I read. Now I need to stop, think, and jot. You try it. What is most important in what you just read? Say it in your own words. We do not want students repeating verbatim what the authors are writing. Try this now. What would you jot down as the most important thing you just read? We find that simple sticky Post-it notes and sticky notes do this work well. You might write something like, After the Civil War, segregation was still present and occurring in communities. It's a simple statement. Let's repeat our steps. It's already chunked. Now let's read. Read along with me. My father was 6 months old in the summer of 1919, the Red Summer. African American blood flowed as Black people were assaulted and killed in race riots and lynchings. The racial tension escalated when Southern Blacks moved north to work in jobs created by World War I. From 1915 to 1930, nearly 1.5 million Black people migrated north at a rate of 100,000 per year. Many of them settled in New York, Chicago, St. Louis, and Detroit. Stop, think, and jot. What is most important in what you just read? Say it in your own words, not the author's. Something as simple as African Americans moved north as jobs opened up would suffice. We're pulling the most important piece. Let's repeat our last chunk. Read along with me. The Black families who fled the South during this period hoped to find a better life and escape Jim Crow life. However, they soon discovered that Jim Crow traveled too. The rapid shift in population caused overcrowding in many cities and increased resentment from many white workers who were now forced to work alongside Blacks. Stop, think, jot. What is most important in what you just read? Say it in your own words, not the author's. Perhaps you wrote something like, African Americans had hoped to change their lifestyles, but the situation of overpopulation made it hard. You just found the gist of many sections in an article. In our next step, I'll teach you and show you how to take these gists and put them into a summary. In this strategy, you've already determined the importance of each of the paragraphs in the text. By simply combining the gists, you will have a summary of 2 pages. As students practice this work, this becomes more and more natural. Good luck and happy gist finding.
Now that you've had a chance to learn about a strategy that your student will be working on in the coming weeks, let's consider how CMS supports you as you support your student. Let's explore some online resources that are here to help along the way. CMS offers a variety of resources to parents in support of student learning. Accessing the CMS website linked here provides many resources at your fingertips for your elementary students in literacy, math, science, and/or social studies. For today's purposes, we are going to preview the resources for literacy. Snapshots of the modules of learning and their themes are accessible by accessing the specific grade level here. So you are able to move within the grade levels by clicking on the arrow here that takes you to the next slide, and you're able to go through kindergarten, first, second, third grade, fourth, and fifth grade. In doing so, this allows you to see the modules for the year along with the topic that your student is studying. You also get information about the big ideas or the guiding questions within each module that are aligned to the topic. And then you also find out what type of tasks your students will be expected to complete and the text that they will use to do so. Again, this is just one resource that you can access from the CMS website that will help you as you are gaining more information about what your students are learning. The next resource that we will take a look at is family letters, and you can access family letters for all grade levels. These family letters provide an overview of what your student will be learning with each module and unit for L education. So we'll just click here, and once you come to this Google folder, you'll go down to grade 3, and we're going to take a look at Module 4, Unit 1. In the family letter, you'll find those same guiding questions and big ideas that we saw on the CMS website. And so you'll find that the guiding questions or big ideas are here to help you understand what the most important things are that students are going to be learning within their module and unit. And then it gives you some information about what your students will be doing at school in terms of the mid-unit assessment. Information about the end of the unit assessment can be found here, and just lots of information that helps you as a parent know how to support your student. So again, this is what you will find in the family letters that are available for you as well. The next thing that we want to take a look at is a resource called Sora, which I'm sure you are already familiar with. And Sora is another resource that can also be helpful because it provides students with digital access to books. So we are now in Sora, which is another resource that can support your student as they are not only learning more about the topic for the module that they're learning, but also the strategy of determining the gist, which was demonstrated for you previously, can also be used, because you can come here and you can choose an informational text. For example, you see one well listed here, and that's one of the main texts that third graders are going to be using as they learn about water within a few weeks, in the coming weeks. So let's find one that might be really interesting for students to preview. Just for an example, let's choose Every Last Drop. So what you would do is you would find an informational text that can support your students, because they can learn more about water and the importance of water, but they can also practice using that strategy of determining the gist by using books that are accessible to them digitally to support them as well. So we do hope that you take advantage of Sora and that you are able to help your students practice the strategy of determining the gist by bringing them to this resource that gives them yet another opportunity to choose a different text but apply the same strategy. As you support your student through use of Sora, it's also important that students have an opportunity to jot their thinking about the gist of the text, because this will support them in forming a summary in their own words. Students can use sticky notes, journals, blank pieces of paper, or a graphic organizer. Students may also want to take advantage of an online resource such as pinup.com, which allows them to craft their thinking about the gist using a digital sticky note. So we'll just go ahead and access this website. And what you see here is these are digital sticky notes. And so just like students would use sticky notes in an actual book, and that was also demonstrated in the strategy about using the gist to determine the summary. So you could also create these sticky notes, and students would go and type onto each sticky note what they think the gist is of each particular part of the text. And then also you could see where they could use the sticky note here to sort of begin to craft their summary. So this is just one other way that you could use sticky notes in a digital format so that students can continue their work around applying this strategy. The other way that you could support your students is through simply creating a graphic organizer that looks very much like the one that you saw in the previous demonstration by just simply coming in and inserting a table and choosing to have a 2-column table, and for however many paragraphs or chunks of text your students will be using, and then that way you could have this column where you actually put down what part of the text they're looking at, and then here is where they would go in and type in what they think the text is mostly about, which is also called the gist. And this is just another way to create an online resource that supports your student. We hope that these resources that you have seen today will be very helpful as you support your students in practicing how to determine the gist to then be able to summarize.
Have any additional questions? Please complete this survey.
Welcome to the 3rd through 5th grade math portion of the Family Instructional Teams, or FIT, event. We're so glad that you're here. Hello, my name is Mallory Hill, and I support 3rd grade math teaching and learning in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. This quarter, 3rd graders are learning how to solve addition and subtraction problems up to 1,000. They are also learning how to solve multi-step word problems that involve a combination of addition, subtraction, and/or multiplication. 3rd grade mathematicians also learn how to find equivalent fractions and how to compare fractions. Today, I will be showing you some strategies that students will be learning for representing fractions and finding equivalent fractions. 3rd graders solve problems that involve the following fractions: halves, fourths, eighths, thirds, and sixths. As students move into 4th grade, 5th grade, and beyond, the denominators that they work with will increase. Let's start by taking a few moments to think through how to solve some 3rd grade math problems that focus on those two skills. The first problem we're going to look at focuses on different ways to partition a shape into fourths. 4 friends each bought a different flavored cake. They decided to cut each of their square cakes into fourths. The pictures below show how they cut their cakes. Which cakes are cut into fourths? Take a moment to think about how you might solve this problem. You can solve it any way you choose, and then I will show you how a third grader might solve this problem. Let's start by taking a look at Lainey's cake. We can see that Lainey's cake is cut into 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. Each of the 4 pieces is the exact same size, so we know that each piece is 1/4 of the entire cake. Lainey's cake is definitely cut into fourths. It looks like Amy started by cutting her cake in half. Then, Amy cut the left half into 2 equal pieces and the right half into 2 equal pieces. Amy's cake has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. At first, third graders may be tempted to think that the 4 pieces of Amy's cake are not equal because they don't look the same. However, when we think about Amy's cake being cut in half first, and then each half being cut in half, we're able to determine that the pieces on the left side of the cake are the same size as the pieces on the right side of the cake. They are just different shapes. So, each piece of Amy's cake is 1/4 of the entire cake. Susan's cake is also cut into 4 pieces, but we can immediately see that the piece in the middle is much larger than the other pieces. Therefore, even though the cake is cut into 4 pieces, it's not cut into fourths because the pieces are not equal. Lisa's cake is cut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. Although all of the pieces of Lisa's cake are equal in size, because she cut her cake into 5 pieces instead of 4, Lisa's cake is not cut into fourths. After thinking through the way that each friend cut her cake, we know that Lainey's and Amy's cakes are cut into fourths. When students are given problems that require them to identify fractional parts, it's important for them to carefully look at the pictures to determine what fraction of the whole each section of the picture is. As we saw with Lisa's cake, it's also essential that students count the number of parts that make up the whole, even when they can easily see that the whole is partitioned into equal parts. Now let's move to a problem that focuses on both fraction representation and equivalence. The number line below represents 1 mile. Use the number line to determine how far Quentin lives from his school. Please take the next 2 minutes to think about how you might approach this problem. You can solve it any way you choose. Then I will show you how a third grader might solve this problem. Let's begin by determining how many parts make up our whole. Our number line starts at 0 and ends at 1, so we need to count the number of spaces on the number line from 0 to 1 whole. From 0 to the first tip mark is 1. As we continue to count the spaces, we know that it takes 8 parts to make up 1 whole, or in other words, each space is 1/8 of the whole number line. Let's skip count by eighths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. 8/8 is equal to 1 whole. Now that we know each section of the number line is 1/8, we're ready to determine how far Quentin's house is from his school. To do so, we need to start at his house and take jumps of 1/8 until we get to Quentin's school. 1/8 plus 1/8 is 2/8. 2/8 plus 1/8 is 3/8. We will continue until we get to where the school is located on the number line. Next, let's see how many jumps of 1/8 it took to get from Quentin's house to Quentin's school. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It took 6 jumps of 1/8, so we know that Quentin lives 6/8 of a mile from his school. When we look at our answer choices, we don't see 6/8 though. Answer choice A is 5/8, which we know is incorrect. Choice B is 7/8, which we also know is not equivalent to 6/8. That leaves us with 2/4 or 3/4. So we're going to have to determine how many fourths are equivalent to 6/8. To do so, let's start by drawing an area model. It's easier for students to create equivalent fractions with a rectangle than a circle, so let's draw a rectangle. Now let's split our rectangle in half. We'll represent 6/8 on the top and then use the bottom rectangle to determine how many fourths are equivalent to 6/8. We know that our top rectangle has to be partitioned into eighths, so we'll start by splitting it in half. Then we'll split each half in half. Right now, our top rectangle is partitioned into fourths, but we need it to be split into eighths. So let's draw a line to break each fourth into 2 equal pieces. Now that our rectangle is split into 8 equal pieces, we're going to shade 6 out of the 8 parts because we know that Quentin's house is 6/8 of a mile from his school. The top rectangle of our area model represents 6/8. Now we're ready to determine how many fourths it takes to equal 6/8. Let's start by splitting our bottom rectangle in half. We know that we can break 2 halves in half to have fourths, so let's draw a line to split each of our halves into 2 equal pieces. Our next step is important because we have to carefully shade in our bottom rectangle until it matches the 6/8 that are shaded in the top rectangle. When we shade 1/4, the amount shaded on the bottom is a lot less than the 6/8 that are shaded on the top. Now we've shaded 2/4, but it's still not equal. When we shade in 3 out of the 4 equal sections of the bottom rectangle, or 3/4, the amount shaded matches the amount shaded in the top rectangle, so we know that 6/8 is equivalent to 3/4. Based on the work we just did together, we can be confident that Quentin lives 3/4 of a mile away from his school. Thank you for exploring these 2 fraction problems with me. As we continue with our event, I am excited for you all to experience some of the 4th grade fraction work with Stephanie Conlon next.
Hey everyone, my name is Stephanie Conlon and I support 4th grade math teaching and learning and CMS. This year in 4th grade, students are currently learning about equivalent fractions, comparing fractions, adding and subtracting fractions, multiplying whole numbers and fractions, and decimal number sense. For the purpose of this video today, we will be focusing on our strategies for multiplying whole numbers and fractions. Here's a problem I'd like for you to try. Mia drank 1/4 pint of water every hour. How much water did Mia drink after 5 hours? Draw a picture to represent this problem. Write an addition equation and a multiplication equation to represent this problem. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to solve this problem. I'd like you to try and do all 3 parts: to draw a picture and to write an addition equation and a multiplication equation, all that represent Mia's problem. And then we'll get back together and I'll show you how I would want students to solve this problem. All right, so this is one of my favorite websites to use when I'm teaching students how to draw fractions to represent their thinking about a problem. You'll see there's a lot of tools down here at the bottom, and I'm happy to go through those with you later. But for now, I just want to draw your attention over to the right here because this is the tool I'll be using, is the drawing tool. All right, so we are being asked to solve a problem where we know that Mia is drinking 1/4 of a pint. So I know she's doing this over 5 hours. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw. This is 1 pint. And I know it's not perfect. It's totally okay, right? We're drawing a representation. So I'm going to change to blue because I wanted to show that this is how much Mia drank in 1 hour. So you just saw me partition a rectangle into 4 equal parts, and I'm coloring one of them. So I'm going to, over here on the side, I'm just going to label that this is 1/4 of a pint. Okay, and then underneath I'm going to label something else because what does this drawing represent? It represents how much she drank, but there's another piece of information that's important for us to consider, and that's how long did it take her to drink this 1/4 of a pint? And that is 1 hour. This is the first hour. I'm going to say first because I'm going to count 5 hours. Cool. Okay, now that I've represented the amount she drank for 1 hour, I'm going to repeat this part of the picture 4 more times so that I can count 1/4 of a pint for all 5 hours. So I'm going to do that real quick. So here are my rectangles that show in 5 hours. 1, 2, there's my 3rd hour, my 4th hour, and my 5th hour. How much she drank each hour. So this is starting to remind me of the work that kids did in 3rd grade around a similar concept. So let me show you what I mean. So in 3rd grade, students learn to represent these types of situations using whole numbers. So changing this problem to read, Mia drank 4 pints of water every hour for 5 hours, allows us to think about how a student might represent this problem using the picture we see here. And so my first question would be, where is 4 in your picture? And I'm sure the student would say, oh, every group has 4 squares, right? And I would say, well, what do those 4 squares represent? I'd want them to say each of those represents a pint that she drank. And then I'd say, well, where's 5 in your picture? And I'd want them to say that I have 5 groups of 4 pints. And this is where the idea of multiplication starts to come into play. So I count each of these groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups, 4 in each group. The next question that we were asked was to represent Mia's amount using an addition equation. And so we can start here with our 3rd grade work, and I would ask, well, how can you figure out how much Mia has drank in 5 hours using addition? What amount is being repeated here? And I would want them to see that there's 4 squares in each group. And so 4 is the number that's being repeated. So in order to figure out how much Mia drank, we could skip count by 4s. 4 and 4 more is 8. And that would be that would get us to the 2nd hour. Another 4 would be the 3rd hour. I'm at 12. Another 4 would be the 4th hour. I'm at 16. And my 5th hour would get us to 20 pints of water in 5 hours. So this would be a way that we would use addition in 3rd grade with whole numbers to show how much Mia drank. So let's go back over to our fraction work and let's think, what amount is being repeated and how many times is it being repeated? Well, I see the same picture over and over again, and the picture represents 1/4 of a pint. That's how much she drank in this situation. So I would suggest that we use the addition equation of repeatedly adding 1/4. So again, we could skip count by 1/4. So I'd have 1/4 and 1 more 4th would be 2/4. Plus another 4th would be 3/4. And now how many hours am I at? 3 hours, because I have 3 groups of 1/4. Another 4th would get us to 4/4. That would be like 1 whole pint. She drank more than a pint. And she had 1 more 4th to go on that 5th hour. So the next question for 4th graders becomes, how do I add these together? Unfortunately, they've already done work around this year. So 4th grade students have explored the idea of joining together fractions that have the same denominator. So in this case, we want to show how do we add or put together 5 groups of 1/4. So I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint to show you how I might do that. So 4th graders learn that they can put these parts together because they all refer to the same size whole, right? All my rectangles are the same size, and they all have the same denominator. So I'm counting a number of 4ths. So one thing I would wonder is, do we even have 1 whole pint when we put these fractions together? So I can click and drag these over. And so far in 4 hours, she has 1 whole pint that she's drank. And there's still 1/4 of a pint over here to include in our sum. So there are 2 ways that we can go about solving this. The first would be to skip count 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, like we did on the other website. And the other way would be to count these 4/4 as 1 whole pint, and then we still have 1/4 left over. So there's really 2 ways that we can represent the amount that Mia drank using fraction addition. And that would look like what you see here. The sum of 5 groups of 1/4 would be 5/4 or 1 and 1/4. Both, which we could count using this picture or this model. So far we've represented Mia's amount using drawings, and we've also represented it using an addition equation. And the next thing we were asked to do was to represent this amount using a multiplication equation. Let's go back to my favorite website to help us do that. So we've been throwing it back to 3rd grade, and I'm going to continue doing that as we move into the multiplication part of this problem. We make the connection in 3rd grade between the model, repeated addition, and multiplication. And in this case, I would ask students in 3rd grade to think about how many groups they have. So in a multiplication equation, we would have the number of groups, and then the second number would tell us the size of each group. This language helps students understand what it means to multiply. If you've ever heard your child say, I timesed it together, then having them think about how many groups do they have and the size of each group will help them understand what they're doing when they multiply whole numbers, and that helps to make a connection to fractions. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. So to highlight this work with whole numbers quickly, how many groups do we have here? I have 5 groups, and then how many are in each group is 4. So the way I would say this equation, because of the story we have, is that there are 5 groups of 4, and that's how I know Mia drank 20 pints. So let's go back to our fractions. Okay, here we are. So again, we know that in a multiplication equation, we want to say how many groups that we have. And I have 5 groups because I still have 5 hours. And then how big is each group? Again, like what amount is being repeated, right? This is the size of a group. And we would say that the size of the group is 1/4 of a pint. That's the amount we're counting 5 times. So this is a way to represent Mia's problem using multiplication, and we're going to land in the same place as we would with our sum from the addition part. So we would say that 5 groups of 1/4 is 5/4, or 1 1/4. And our models are what helps us understand where 5/4 comes from. Remember that we could count all of our 1/4 pints up in one rectangle and see that we still have 1/4 left over, or we could skip count. 1/4 and 1/4 is 2/4, and 3/4, 4/4, and 5/4. We could count to find our total of 5/4 or 1 1/4 as well. So one important takeaway for students when they're multiplying is that when we're multiplying a whole number times a fraction that has a 1 as the numerator, you're repeatedly adding or counting that fraction. That's what we're doing here. So that helps students make sense of what they're doing and why. And it takes us way beyond a procedure or just a set of steps that may not otherwise mean much to them. Thank you so much for joining us for the 4th grade portion of the video. And now I'm going to turn it over to Susan Copeland to explore math for 5th grade in the 3rd quarter.
Hi, my name is Susan Copeland, and I support 5th grade math teaching and learning in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. During the 3rd quarter, 5th grade students will be working on multiplying fractions, dividing fractions, finding volume, and converting units of measure. We're going to solve some problems today involving multiplying and dividing fractions. Let's get started. Thinking about multiplication of fractions in the context we experience every day helps us to make sense of mathematics. Take, for example, cooking. Fractions frequently show up in recipes. This recipe calls for 2 1/3 cups of Bisquick. But what if I want to make 2 1/2 loaves of banana bread? Then I need to multiply each ingredient times 2 1/2. Take a moment and think about how you might solve this problem. You can solve any way you choose. Then I will show you some ways that 5th graders might solve the same problem. Some students may use fraction bars. Let's take a look at how fraction bars can be used to solve this problem. We want to make this recipe 2.5 times, and we know that if we make this recipe 1 time, we're going to need 2 1/3 cups of Bisquick. I could represent that using fraction tiles for 2 1/3. Now, because I need this 2.5 times, I can record this as a multiplication equation. 2 1/2 times 2 1/3. You can always replace the multiplication symbol with the words groups of. 2 1/2 groups of 2 1/3. So this is one group of 2 1/3. This is two groups of 2 1/3. And then I need a half group. Sometimes it's easier to start with a whole group and then think of what half of that would be. So right now I have 3 groups of 2 1/3. 1, 2, 3. But because it's only 2 1/2, I need to figure out what half of this last group is. And I can easily look at the 1 wholes and think half of those 2 parts if I take away 1 whole. But the 1/3 part is just 1 piece, so really I need to take it and cut it in half. Now, the great thing is 5th grade students have been working on equivalent fractions for a couple of years, and they've spent a lot of time thinking about the relationship between thirds and sixths. So students should be able to very quickly change 1/3 into 2/6. And so now I can think about what half of this is. I can take away one of the wholes and one of the sixths, and now I have one recipe for Bisquick, the second recipe for Bisquick, and half of a recipe for Bisquick. So the only thing that I have left to do is figure out what this amount is. Let's put the wholes together first. We can see that there are 5 wholes, and then we have these fractional pieces. We have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/6. We want to use the same denominator instead of saying 2 1/3 and 1/6, even though it would be the same. So we're going to use that same equivalence we used just a moment ago, and we're going to exchange 1/3 for 2/6, and we're going to exchange the other 1/3 for 2/6. So now we can see that what we have is 5 wholes and 5 sixths. So if we make the recipe 2 1/2 times, we will need 5 5/6 cups of Bisquick. So 2 1/2 times 2 1/3 equals 5 5/6. In 4th grade, students used open arrays, also known as the area model, to solve multiplication of whole number problems. Students continue to use this tool to multiply fractions. And continued practice is a good idea because they will use the same tool to multiply polynomials in secondary math classes. So let's look at our recipe problem using this model. I'm going to show 2 ways to represent with this tool. When students first begin using this tool, it may help students to see the whole represented for the fractional parts. We can decompose the quantities into the whole numbers and the fractions. For area, we would be multiplying the length times the width. So if we thought of the length as being 2 1/2, we could decompose 2 1/2 into 2 wholes and 1/2. To show the 1/2 in that bottom row, let's cut that bottom row into 2 equal parts so that we can see the halves clearly. And we can shade 2 1/2 across this shape. We can also decompose the width, 2 1/3, and decompose that into 2 1/3. And just like we did with a half, we want to partition that last column into thirds this time. Now we can color 2 wholes and 1/3 down. Notice that when we shade down, where the 2 colors overlap is the area that we're referring to when we say 2 1/2 times 2 1/3. So we can break that space into 4 parts based on the way we decompose the numbers, and we can find the area of each part. An area that is 2 by 2 would be 4. 2 times 1/3 would be 2/3. 1/2 of 2 would be 1, and 1/2 times 1/3 would be 1/6. We can also see that in the model. This is why drawing the whole when students first begin helps, because they can see that there's 6 equal parts in that last whole, and this problem or that space is referring to one of them. Then all we have to do is add these parts together. 4 plus 1 plus 2/3 plus 1/6. And 5th grade students have already learned that when we add fractions with different denominators, in this case we have thirds and sixths, we need to use an equivalent fraction to change them to the same denominator. So let's change 2/3 to the equivalent fraction 4/6. Now we can add these together. 4 plus 1 plus 4/6 plus 1/6. 4 plus 1 is 5. 4/6 and 1/6 is 5/6. So the total area is 5 and 5/6, just like we found with the fraction tiles. 2 and 1/2 times 2 and 1/3 is 5 and 5/6. Now as students build fluency with this model, sometimes they stop drawing that whole for the last column and for the last row, and they just decompose into the fractions. What they draw might look something more like this. Notice that the parts are still the same. They've still decomposed the whole number in fractions so that they still have 2 times 2, 2 times 1/3, 1/2 times 2, and 1/2 times 1/3. And so those partial products are the same. They can be added together for 5 and 5/6. An important thing to know about 5th grade multiplication of fractions is that when they are multiplying a fraction times a whole number, they can multiply halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, eighths, tenths, and twelfths. However, when they are multiplying a fraction times a fraction, the expectation for 5th graders is only to multiply halves, thirds, and fourths. Let's take a look at an example of division with fractions in 5th grade. 5th graders are only required to divide a whole number by a unit fraction, that's a fraction with a numerator of 1, or a unit fraction by a whole number. Students do not divide fractions by fractions, or even divide by fractions with a numerator greater than 1. Just like with multiplication, context or story situations are helpful when making sense of division of fractions. When we divide, we are separating the total into same-size groups, or separating a total into equal groups. Let's take a look at 2 examples. Let's say that we have a board that is 3 meters long and we want to make cubby shelves that are 1/4 meter long. How many 1/4 meter shelves can I make from this board? Take a moment to solve this problem any way you would like. Then we will look at how 5th graders might approach this problem. First, let's represent this problem with an expression. We can represent this with 3 divided by 1/4 because we are seeing how many 1/4ths are in 3 holes. Students might use fraction bars or a drawing to represent the 3 holes. Then each hole can be partitioned into fourths. The first hole has 4/4, the second hole has 4/4, and the third hole has 4/4. So if we cut 3 meters into 1/4 size pieces, there will be 12 pieces. 3 divided by 1/4 is 12. Let's try a different type of 5th grade division problem. Let's say that I had an extra 1/4 meter shelf left from the previous problem. And now I want to cut the extra shelf into 3 equal pieces for a craft. How many meters long will each new piece be? Take a moment to solve this problem any way you choose. Then we will take a look at how 5th graders might solve this same problem. This is also a division problem. This time we're dividing 1/4 by 3. 5th grade students might think about partitioning 1/4 meter into 3 equal parts, just like the problem describes. One of those pieces would be this part shaded in pink. So we can look in our diagram and tell where in our diagram the answer is represented, but how much is that? We can think about the fact that we know that there are 3 equal parts in 1/4. There would be 3 equal parts in the next fourth, and the next fourth, and the next fourth. So that would make a total of 12 equal parts in the whole. So if we cut 1/4 into 3 equal parts, it will be 1/12. 1/4 divided by 3 is 1/12. Thank you.
All right, so we also have a few resources we'd like to share with you, and one involves more information on the CMS website about the curriculum for math that your child will be learning this year. So I'm going to go to the CMS website now and show you how to get to this page where you can access those awesome resources. Here we are at the CMS homepage, and to access those elementary curriculum resources, you're going to go to Departments. And from here, we want to find curriculum, elementary curriculum. So we're going to go to curriculum and instruction. And here we are at elementary curriculum. Awesome. So from here, you can choose to explore any of these links below. And I'm just going to show you around the math part of this site for just a moment. So here you have some information about math in elementary school and our curriculum, the Envision math adaption that we have. And then underneath that, you're going to see some slides. This is a slide deck you can click through to see the topics and sequence of the topics for each grade level. Your child's Canvas work will also include information about which topic is currently being taught. Each grade level's slide deck is a different color, and you may need to scroll through a few of them to get to the page that you're looking for. Underneath this slide deck, you'll see Envision Math Family Connection. If you click on the Home School Connection link, you're taken to Google Drive where you can access the family letters that will give you more information about the current topic that your child is learning at home. They start with topic 1. Topic 10 is extending multiplication concepts to fractions, which is what we learned about today. So I find it here. And you'll also notice that each letter is written in both English and Spanish. And I have one more thing to show you on the CMS website, so let's head back that way. The last thing I want to share with you is the contact information for the specialists that you've been introduced to today. You are always welcome to email any of us at any time with any questions you have about what your child is learning in math this year. Now I'd like to show you Dreambox. Another great resource at your child's fingertips is Dreambox. This website is free to all K-5 students in CMS and provides your child an opportunity to practice the skills they need most using engaging games, lessons that use virtual manipulatives and tools, and practice problems. Please reach out to your child's teacher for more information about how to access Dreambox so that you can start taking advantage of this amazing resource at home.
Thank you for joining us for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade Family Fit Night. I want to take a moment now to share the CMS FIT Night webpage with you, which can be found by going to the bit.ly on your screen, bit.ly/F, I, T, lowercase night, NIGHT. On this page, we have a frequently asked questions document with questions you might have after joining us tonight. The FAQ document contains links to resources shared in the presentation, as well as answers to common questions we receive regarding 3-5 math and literacy content. If you have an additional question that is not listed on the FAQ, please submit your question to the 3-5 Math and Literacy Specialist using this form. You will choose your child's grade, content area, reading, or math, and then enter your question and press submit. Please take a moment now to write down this bit.ly link, bit.ly/FIT Night Questions, where you can access the form to submit additional questions. Please note that the bit.ly link is case sensitive, so be sure to note which letters are capitalized. Once you have submitted a question, check back on the CMS FIT Night webpage, as we will be updating the FAQ document with the additional questions shared with us in the Google form. Thank you again for joining us this evening for the 3-5 Family Fit Night.